I have been to Omaha, Nebraska. I know you wondered. I know the burning question. You woke up this morning and go, I wonder if David Brody's ever been to Omaha, Nebraska. I get that, and I can answer that in the affirmative. I have. Welcome back, everybody, to the first Friday of 2026, this edition of American Sunrise, the one and only, by the way. I'm David Brody. Christians under attack in Nigeria. And that deadly Hanukkah terror attack in Australia, both sounding the alarm, the resurgence of ISIS and global jihadist networks happening, and it's happening now. Intelligence officials say terror groups are rebuilding, they're recruiting, they're expanding their reach from the Middle East to Europe, now the West, which is why we just bombed an ISIS stronghold in Nigeria. Joining us now to break it all down, retired Navy Captain, GOP strategist, and California State Senate candidate, Armen Kurdian. Armen, thanks for being here, and Happy New Year to you, sir. Look, so are we watching the early signs of this new global terror wave? Because to me, this has been around for a very long time, and radical Islamic terrorism has been the linchpin in all of this. It never really did go away.
No, and Happy New Year, Dr. Gina, David, and Emily. So what we're seeing in Africa is ISIS basically trying to reconstitute itself, and they're having perhaps, we'll say, maybe an easier time in hiding in the shadows in Nigeria because, it's not as much open desert. There's a lot of conflict, and they're just sort of managing to keep themselves embedded within it. And they've expanded from West Africa into that area, and we've seen what's happening up north in Somalia as well. These ISIS terrorists, these Salafists, have been attacking Christians and Muslims at the same time. A lot of times these kidnappings and extortions that they're doing, they're just raining terror throughout this country. And unfortunately, the Nigerian government, even though they cooperated with us in these attacks, they are also rife with corruption as well. So that's not very helpful. These strikes, we heard that, Tomahawk missiles, although there was a report that the Nigerian government said that MQ-9 Reapers were used. Perhaps, that's open reporting, but perhaps the U.S. government didn't want that to get out. But at the same time, this can't just be a U.S.-only effort to keep ISIS suppressed in Africa. The international community has to be involved. Our NATO allies have to be involved. We can't just be doing this on our own.
Yeah, definitely need to have more involvement for sure. I do want to stay on the terror threat for a moment here. When drug cartels start acting like terror groups, does that change how the U.S. has to respond? Are we finally calling this threat what it really is?
It's very interesting. Where do you draw the line between a massive criminal enterprise and a terrorist organization? And I think you can say that both can be true in this case, in that these massive criminal organizations are using terror in order to maintain their objectives. Essentially, this opens up new opportunities and new tools for the U.S. to use for the international community, following the money, in seizing money, seizing assets, additional overhead and intelligence assets, tracking what these cartels are actually doing. Fentanyl, cocaine, opium, they don't explode. They don't kill people with shrapnel. They kill people when they're ingested. They kill people through surreptitious activities. So they are weapons of mass destruction, however you want to use it. Perhaps it requires a little act of Congress to classify drugs of a certain nature and a certain quantity as weapons of mass destruction. What Trump has done in the open seas to suppress these drug boats coming across to the U.S. and Europe is, unprecedented and has been highly, highly effective. It's driving them more towards some of these other methods that are maybe easier to intercept. Remember, about 80% of the drugs coming to the U.S. does come through legal ports of entry through hiding. So now that the border's been secure and that we don't have to worry about the high seas on these little boats anymore, we can concentrate more of our Border Patrol and DEA assets on these ports of entry to stop the drugs coming in through normal entry.
Armen, as a California State Senate candidate, you're seeing this up close. There are reports of cartels operating, of course, right there in California. How did Sacramento politics turn into the Golden State for a playground for narco-terrorists? And what has to change to shut this down?
Well, it's because California's turned into a playground for liberal progressive politics. They're more interested in banning plastic bags and DEI and woke ideology than they are about actually enforcing the law and protecting the citizens and people who live here and pay taxes. What has to change is, we got to get the right people elected, but we also need to get better organized as a Republican Party in order to actually make this happen. It's not simply a question of that the Democrats suddenly had better ideas and that's why they got elected. Is that frankly, to be blunt, the Democrat Party on balance in California has been more effective than the Republican Party in going out and winning elections. Elections are about campaigns. They're not always necessarily about ideas. If you can't connect with the people or get your message across, you're not going to win. They have a huge money advantage. It's going to require a lot more ground effort from people, local candidates making this kind of effort. But frankly, the DAs that have been elected throughout the state, the state's attorney general, and what we've seen up in Sacramento, it's got to stop. Sadly, we have made 50% turnout. If Republicans would just turn out in greater numbers and get out, we could actually win more elections. It's going to be a long struggle to make that case. All these terrible things happen, but at the end of the day, so many families are struggling to feed their families and pay their rent. They don't have time to pay attention to politics for 23 months out of a 24-month cycle, and then they just look at the piece of mail that they think is the shiniest and prettiest and vote in that direction. And this is something we got to change.
You're looking to change California, looking to change Sacramento, running for Senate out there in California. What do you think? What's the prognosis for 2026? Because you're right, it's an all hands on deck situation. Can it really happen? I mean, what's the reality on the ground? And what about the governorship of California? Are we ever going to see a Republican governor in California ever again?
I think we can. We've seen, in my home state of Kansas, we've seen Democrat governors in the home state of Kansas. I don't see why we can't see a Republican governor in the state of California. When I talk to voters, when I engage with them, and just whether it's somebody at the grocery store or somebody I just meet and says, "Oh, hey, by the way, I'm running for the state senate. What's on your mind?" You're building a connection with a voter. Feel, felt, found. What's going on with you? And that a lot of times has been what is missing. And again, let's be honest. A lot of the wokeness out there, the stuff that really riles up the Republican base, it may not really pull a lot of folks in the middle, and it certainly doesn't, sway the needle on the Democrat side for the most part. What does is basic kitchen table economics, food prices, gas prices, rent, fixing the roads, those basic things that hit close to home that are the most tangible things that you can actually feel and see with your senses. This is where, Republicans and conservatives need to focus their efforts, and this consistent messaging. And you need to see candidates and state campaigns and local campaigns working together, not separately. You need to coordinate their efforts to maximize the use of our scarce resources to get that message across. We saw with the Prop 50 campaign how poorly that was run. We didn't have a money problem, but we certainly had a messaging problem, and we had an organizational problem there. There's no reason that Prop 50, which basically redrew the congressional lines in this state, should have won 2-1. We do have some good people running for governor, Steve Hilton, Chad Bianco. There's a lot of other lower-level candidates, but it's probably going to be one of the first two that's end up going to win the Republican nomination. With the proper messaging, that cuts across the middle, that doesn't, I hate to say it doesn't sound too Republican or too conservative, but really hits those 70-30 issues, and then points directly to the failure of the Democrat leadership, then, we do have a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be awesome to see that in California. I know Gina and I both lived there for a while, and it has just gone downhill with policies. So it would be great to see. But Armen, that was good advice that I think candidates all over the country should be taking for the midterm elections. What would you like to see President Trump do to be able to help out with these candidates? What would you like to see throughout 2026 to make sure that November goes well?
Donald Trump needs to keep talking about the basics again. He needs to talk about the economy. He needs to talk about jobs. It's very interesting. We saw really good job growth. That's something to talk about. We saw unemployment rate at 2.7%. And that is despite the state of California having the highest unemployment rate of any state in the nation, despite the fact that small business creation in this state is deteriorating and people are fleeing the blue states. Maybe you could come up with some statistics, say, look, here's the states with Republican legislatures. Here's how they're doing. Here's the states with Democrat legislatures. Here's how they're doing, and draw that parallel and make that connection. Trump has done some great things around the world and trying to bring peace. He secured the border. He's got to talk about these basic things that affect people. And one thing I've liked that I've seen in this year is there's been a very steady, low-level amount of advertising you see on national TV and radio about the good things that are happening in the country because of these policies. We need to continue that to keep it in the backs of people's minds. And Trump needs to hit this every time he's out there talking. He needs to talk about jobs. He's got to talk about the economy. He's got to talk about taxes going down. He's got to talk about real wages going up. Hit them over and over and over again. Never stop. Every opportunity, you've got to do that. And then Republicans need to keep up with that message and follow it up. Say, hey, I'm for jobs. I'm for lower taxes. I'm for not spending your money on wasteful things. I'm for fixing the roads. I'm for fixing that pothole in the street, which has been there for the last 3 years. Those local issues, those things that have been sticking in the sides, those thorny issues, in city governments, in county governments, can keep making that report.
And Armen, you're doing that every single day out there, running for California State Senate there. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Armen.
Thanks much. Have a great day.
You too.
All right, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Coming up, a lamestream media shakeup is underway. Who are going to be the winners and losers of 2026? Find out next as American Sunrise continues.